So, what I am advocating for here in the concept of the Neo-Indigenous lifestyle is really very quite simple. It is for an individual to consciously adopt a lifestyle that at least the level as best one is able, internally and externally, to relate to other in a manner that is constructive and mutually beneficial rather than destructive and exploitive. It's a practice rather than a moral philosophy. It acknowledges fundamentally as a first principle that the life process is the essential predicate for our own existence. And unless we are a co-participant in that, which is constructive and elevating that process, we are choosing destruction for it and ourselves. It's very simple. It's quite objective. As a first principle, I find that that perspective can provide tremendous guidance in practically any of the pressing issues that we feel faced with today. But creeds that are that simple and that honest are so contrary to the moralizing and legalese that passes for ethics in the world that we live in, that they seem shockingly sparse, and they have a tendency to attract all sorts of opposition. So in anticipation of that, let's try to diffuse it a little bit. So it's often right here in the conversation that if I've had some discussion with, say, people that are religious, at this moment they will interject, oh, well, all you are saying here is what all the major religions say, and you're just basically espousing the golden rule. This do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I'd be like, well, maybe. And they're like, well, sure. Like, there are these basic fundamentals that all human beings agree to that are held as moral truths in all cultures. Isn't that just obvious? And from my perspective, it's like I would respond, no, it's not obvious at all. Maybe you can give me an example of that. And they'd say, well, how about this? Thou shalt not kill. That is a value that's held in every culture in the world, and every major religion has a commandment much like that. Thou shalt not kill. And I'm like, well, that sounds great, but I think you are missing at the end of that commandment the massive asterisk that conditions that statement in so many ways that the commandment itself becomes nonsensical. Right? I think it's completely conspicuous that in most any culture, while they may espouse a maxim or a commandment against killing, sometimes that's simply defined as murdering, which obviously is a very conditional kind of killing. Sometimes it's not appropriate for private individuals to kill, but governments can kill. Sometimes it's okay if you don't kill people within your tribe, but killing people in other tribes is okay. Sometimes it's okay to kill people who have done certain things to you, but not people that have not done certain things to you. Certainly in our own culture, even in the heart of supposed civilization, you can kill people through legal documents, or with the holding of medical treatment, or through impoverishment, or a whole host of other mechanisms which are relatively distal. You can murder people that way just fine. But to club somebody with an axe handle, that's crude, and that would be prohibited. No, there is no standard among religions where they hold these things universally true. There are not universal truths within religion once you get past the platitude that falls apart rapidly when you see the massive asterisk at the end of the commandment. I mean, one can take this further. If one, for example, would take another commandment that has been held up, this would be an excellent illustration of precisely what I'm trying to avoid here. Honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. You would think that would be very simple and straightforward. If you were to pick up a copy of the Talmud, you would find that the first 100 pages of that 8,000-page document contains 100 pages of loopholes about how you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, but your slaves can. And you can order a pizza, but you can't take it in the front door, but you can take it in the back door. And on, and on, and on, and on. I generally believe that individuals that are interested in nitpicking minutia when it comes to standard of behavior are not interested in upholding the standard of behavior at all, but are rather looking for one of two outcomes. One of which is to justify their own intent to disregard whatever that moral precept it is that they claim to hold, or two, to simply make it so obtuse that it is impossible, completely impossible for them to uphold it at all. This is as far away from the kind of posture in relating that I can imagine being. It is not a relational posture. It is one that is designed for the specific purpose of justifying exploitation. And individuals that are attracted to it, in my mind, are individuals who have obviously embraced a posture that is destructive, which is why they are disassociated even from their own precepts and from their own definitions of good. This is not the way that I would encourage anybody to approach this kind of thinking. But I think there's something that can be learned here by the ubiquitous nature and tendency, at least within people that are participants of what we call civilization, to cheat. Okay. I mean, let's posit it this way. If you love a thing, do you want to harm it? Do you look for loopholes, ways that you can harm it that you can somehow justify to yourself, or do you avoid harming it entirely? If you have a good relationship, say a marriage with someone, and you value, say, monogamy, do you spend your time trying to dream up ways of getting as close to infidelity as possible without somehow stepping over some magic rule? Or do you stay as far away from that breach of trust as possible if you have a good relationship? Who would it be who had a healthy relationship with life and reality that would wish to destroy life and reality? who would engage in that? Who makes the effort? Who tries to find the workaround, the loophole? I would compare and contrast, following my example again, just making a sincere personal attempt, again, this Neo-Indigenous motif, to be a co-participant in that creative process that we call life in a constructive manner as best we are able with the knowledge that we're in possession of. I mean, it's very simple. It's a principle. That's a value that you choose because it's something that you revere and you love. It's something that you choose to do. Who wants to cheat that except individuals that do not have that relationship? We can compare and contrast again. Maybe some 7,000 page document about how you can claim to love a thing while still injuring it. I prefer the very simple maxims that you hear in the famous prayer on my coast among some of the communities, which is as simple and austere as I can imagine. It goes thusly: I hope to live my life in such a manner that I can face my ancestors without shame. I don't think an individual needs much more than that in order to guide them in the choices they may make to have a healthy, constructive relationship with life and others that they love. Now, it should be asked now, why? This being such a absolutely plain, simple, honest, plaintive way of approaching life. Why is it so contrary to our own thinking? Why does it seem so alien, so far removed from the way we think about, well, ethics in general? Why would it be that these creeds, especially those that elevate legalese rather than transparent, objective quality, why those should be dominant? And it's obvious, really. I mean, again, as we talked about in our first discussion here, you know about the perspectives that are valuable to the king. If you start thinking about this, like I am suggesting, if your primary alliance is to the life process first, and you are going to make the choices about how to best apply your actions in that context, the king's opinion is now irrelevant. You are the king. You are the final lawmaker and the final lawbreaker. Because the only relationship that is relevant from this point of view of autonomy, of liberty, is yours. You may want to have a maxim such as, thou shalt not kill as a governing principle. That is fine. But the application of that will come down to one fundamental thing, your asterisk, which is going to be whether or not your action elevates the life process and it advances that creative process, or whether it diminishes it, retards it, or destroys it. Everything else is secondary. That's why this kind of thinking is dangerous, and this is why it's discouraged. So if one were to find this kind of thinking compelling and liberating and empowering, as I do, how is it that one would go about embarking on the path of making this a personal practice? And again, it's quite simple. It would be to reflect and, as much as you are able, ascertain that aspect of your living which is most destructive to the life process that makes your existence possible. And that is going to depend a great deal on who you are and where you are. For some of us, that may be interpersonal relationships. For some of us, that may be careers. For some of us, that may be hobbies, activities, dreams, goals, desires that we currently hold. It can be a whole lot of things. It can be a whole lot of things. But in reflection, if one discovers that that behavior, whatever it is that cross purposes with one's own existence, whatever that most egregious thing is, if you want to have a loving relationship with life, well, stop it. And then proceed thusly. And as one goes forward, well, ask the question repeatedly so that at some point in your life you will start to feel that you too could stand before your ancestors without shame. Now, you will definitely find that trying to make an honest effort towards right living, one that's simple and objective, is going to draw you a fair amount of ire, and there will be individuals, mostly from the legalese school, that will come and try to shoot you down. There can be a million examples of this. A way that might happen would go something like this. Let's say that I'm living on my sailboat here, and I've just presented to somebody my views about Neo-Indigenous living, and it bothers them because they understand the authenticity in this, and it makes them feel queasy, I guess. So they want to make sure that they find some way of trying to diminish the authenticity of my own actions. Okay. So they may blurt out something like, well, you heat your boat with fossil fuels, don't you? And then that will generally be followed up with some kind of statement like, well, see, you're no different than I. As if I was trying to be the same or different than them. That's not my goal. My goal is to have a quality relationship with life, not compare myself to other people. That comparing to other people thing is something that others like to do within the power dynamic of exploitive cultures. That's not my my motivation. My motivation is simply to be as constructive as I know how to be. So you can approach that kind of attack in a couple of ways. The easiest way is to blow it off and simply ignore people who have advice for you, who are not remotely as able as you in how you go about your business. That would be different, of course, from the right criticism of an individual who might well be a mentor, who may have a better way of going about living a constructive life than I currently possess. And if so, that it doesn't hurt to listen. I mean, there is a place for instruction, of course. But from your own point of view, again, it's important to understand that of your choices, let's say how you were going to heat your boat, There are many ways in which I could go about doing that. And there are consequences to any of the choices. And we're not looking at this from a point of view of trying to make or break certain rules, but rather to follow a guiding principle of doing it the best I know able. And I could, I suppose, burn driftwood, or I could do other things. As it is, because I live in a very, very small space, and I have spent a lot of time in quality construction of the boat, so it is resource efficient in the first place. Focusing more on permanent attributes like insulation, build quality, things of that nature. By the time I get into the whys and hows about whether it's fossil fuels or driftwood or whatever, that becomes such a small aspect of the overall impact of my choices that while there might be some fine-tuning to do there, I am comfortable with, I could stand before my ancestors without shame, telling them exactly what my choices were and why I made them, because I'm doing so to the best of my ability and with complete sincerity. Is that not plain? Again, if we're guided by that central maxim of as best we are able to have a authentic, healthy relation with the life process and to be a co-participant with that, that's constructive, and all else is details. If you can grab that, you will understand fundamentally what it is I'm trying to communicate here. Thanks.